Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Brandon Cornett, author of Purgatory and host of the Dark Fiction YouTube channel. And today, I'm going to be serving up some ideas for your next zombie apocalypse novel. This video is for any writers out there, horror writers, who are looking for some ways to innovate within the zombie genre. And I know what you're thinking, Brandon, come on. This genre's been around for decades. It's worn out, it's exhausted, and there's a fair point that it has been around for a long time. But I think that there's a lot of room for innovation and for fresh ideas within the zombie genre. We saw this a few years back when Max Brooks used the format of Studs Terkel's The Good War about World War II, and he added a zombie element to it, and he came up with World War Z. That was an example of coming at the zombie genre from a fresh angle and creating something new and engaging for readers. So if that's something you're trying to do, hopefully you'll get something out of this video that you can run with. So let's just go right into it with idea number one for a zombie apocalypse novel, and that is to make your protagonist a reluctant guardian. And what I mean by this is maybe your protagonist, your main character, is not a parent, they're not a guardian, they never have been, they have no experience at it, but because of the events that transpire in your novel, they have that role thrust upon them. One example, it's an easy thing to construct within your story. One example would be maybe a guy is fleeing from his neighborhood when an outbreak occurs, and he sees a child standing on a street corner. The parents are dead, they've been taken out. And so he does what most people would do, and he grabs this kid and takes them with him, and they flee together. And from a storytelling standpoint, what I like about this idea is that it pushes the main character way outside of their comfort zone. You know, this person is not only trying to survive a zombie apocalypse, but they have this new role of a caregiver and a guardian that they have fallen into, and they have no experience with it, so they're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. And it gets my wheels turning, and I think it will for you as well if you're a writer. There's a lot of room to explore this angle and to make something new within the zombie genre. Moving on to idea number two is to foreshadow the outbreak in advance in the book, and then to essentially have the subsequent chapters serve as a kind of a countdown. So one way to go about this from a mechanics standpoint is to maybe have in the first chapter terrorists or some other rogue group who has created a zombie virus, if you will, and they're going to release it in conjunction with a major event that's going to take place. And maybe that event is New Year's Eve in Times Square. Maybe it's the Super Bowl, the World Cup, some other major sporting event. Maybe it's a big concert event, a presidential inauguration. That one's story tells itself, I think. Maybe it's a summit of world leaders. So basically what you do is you set that premise up in advance. The reader knows that, but the characters in the story don't know it's coming. So the reader knows that there's this event coming, and then the chapters work up to that major event, and you as a reader know that the shit is going to hit the fan when that event takes place. So I think that would really engage the reader and keep them turning pages, and there's a lot of room to have some fun with that as a writer. Idea number three is to set your novel in an interesting, fortifiable place. And this picture here is just to get your imagination going. This is Merengar Fort in India, an ancient fort set upon a hill, as you can see. And that's just one example of having your characters. You can imagine some tourists who are visiting this place and taking pictures and all of that normal touristy stuff. And then that's when the outbreak occurs. So right away you have something really interesting for the reader, which is this, foreign exotic locale, and then you put the zombie outbreak on top of that. And then boom, you've got a really interesting novel, something that I think is fresh within the zombie genre that you can go with. Idea number four is to give your zombie novel a historical backdrop. And this is similar to the previous slide in the sense that right away you start off with a book that's interesting because it's a unique time in history, and you add the zombie outbreak on top of that, so you keep the readers engaged on multiple levels. And for example, maybe it takes place in ancient Egypt, or the Elizabethan period in England, or maybe World War II Europe. Whatever the case may be, you have multiple things happening at one time that the reader can be interested in, and I think it would really make an engaging read. Idea number 5 is to tell your story from the zombie's point of view. And I know that you've got to figure this out in advance and work out the details and the logistics, so to speak, because you can't have a full-fledged zombie being your protagonist if the whole time he's just going rah. So maybe, for example, you have a character with a partial immunity to the zombie virus, and they look like a zombie, but the brain is still intact somewhat, so you can get inside that character's head and reveal their inner thoughts. And then maybe later in the book they revert back to a full human condition. And so there's a lot of room, like with these other ideas, where you could explore this as an author and take it in a new direction that people haven't seen before. Idea number 6 is to combine science fiction and zombie genres. Science fiction is a pretty broad umbrella, so you've got everything from artificial intelligence to androids, robots, to space travel, time travel. There's a lot of room there to explore from a zombie genre standpoint. And this is something that hasn't been done a lot in the past, and there's a lot of room for innovation. Lastly, idea number 7 is to focus on an interesting group of people. And here we have nuns with guns. What's more interesting than that? But this goes back to something we've covered in previous slides, in that if you start with a premise for your novel, whether it's the historical time period, or the setting, or the locale, or the group of people who populate the story, the reader has something that they can be interested in already. And then when you throw in a zombie apocalyptic scenario, it gets even more interesting. So you have something that's new and fresh and can keep the reader turning pages. So what kind of interesting group of people? Maybe it is nuns in a convent. Maybe it's some scouts out on a camping trip in the woods, where their resourcefulness is going to come into play. Maybe it's prisoners on a work release. Maybe soldiers on a training mission, or a school for gifted children, gifted in the sense of the X-Men movies, if you know what I mean. So this is just another way to add another level of interest to a zombie novel, just like with the previous slides.